Alright, this video kind of sucks to make, and first of all, full shout out to my editor MarMar. She liked The Acolyte, at least I think she did, and she doesn't like editing these super negative videos for me, but too bad, because we need to look at reality when it comes to The Acolyte. The Acolyte was a show I certainly didn't like, but I also didn't hate as much as some people did. Like, overall, yeah, I thought it was bad, but there were some redeemable moments. I liked Plagueis' inclusion. I didn't mind some of the minor lore hiccups. The problem was, I didn't care, and it seems like a lot of people were in that same boat. So let's talk about why, the evidence of the show not being a success, and what can be learned for the future. Now, I want to give credit to Jar Jar Jargon over on Star Wars Leaks, who did a good job of compiling this information, but Nielsen, the TV rating service, just updated their Acolyte viewership for the 8th episode, and now we have a full view of how the season performed. Now, admittedly, Nielsen numbers aren't concrete. There's no guarantee that they are 100% accurate, but we do have Nielsen numbers for every live-action Star Wars show, so we can at least compare it with what's came before, and also in terms of the greater picture, what's being released across the streaming world. And the numbers don't lie. The Acolyte has performed very, very poorly. It's the worst performing Star Wars show. It's been sloughing viewers since the first episode. And really, most concerningly, it's just not registering on the greater streaming landscape. And if I were working for Lucasfilm or working for Disney, that would be my biggest concern. Not that The Acolyte performed less well than The Mandalorian, but that The Acolyte and Star Wars as a product is something that people can just ignore. It's not must-watch TV. So I will link to the post in the description, but without going into specific numbers and just giving broad generalities, The Acolyte had not only the lowest total watch time out of any Star Wars show, but also the fewest total average viewers. And I make that distinction because Nielsen numbers are usually based on minutes viewed. The Acolyte was a shorter show overall, but even still, the numbers are the lowest and a fraction of what Disney saw with The Mandalorian, for example, or even shows like The Book of Boba Fett. I alluded to this as well, but the show was also losing overall viewers on a week-by-week basis, which again is concerning because overall viewership is based not just on the new episode of the week, but the total viewership for the entire series that week. So you can contrast The Acolyte with a show like Andor, which had a low viewership, but was at least picking up fans, indicating that it could be successful in a second season. When you compare this with the fact that The Acolyte was more expensive than shows which performed better like Ahsoka, it just doesn't paint a very rosy picture for the potential future of the series. I don't think we're getting an Acolyte Season 2, and in fact, I don't think we should get an Acolyte Season 2. My dog, I don't know if the mic is picking it up, is huffing because he agrees, but Star Wars, and I mentioned this in my Mandalorian video last week, is going down a dangerous path. They're losing interest. You know, say what you will about The Last Jedi. Everyone was talking about it. People hated the direction. People loved the direction. It was in the cultural zeitgeist. The Acolyte doesn't even register. And again, if the show were actually good, I wouldn't care. Because as a Star Wars fan, what I want is good Star Wars media. I want, art. I want good art. We got that with Andor. I don't care if it was just me and my dog watching Andor. I would want them to make more of it because it's great. With other shows, I think that there's the potential to tell interesting stories and also, bring in new fans. With The Acolyte, I just don't see what that series is offering. People aren't watching. They're not growing the Disney Plus viewer base. And in my opinion, at least subjectively, the story was not well executed. I think there were elements that were well done. I didn't, as I mentioned, hate all of it, but this is the exact same reason why I just can't get behind the make Solo 2 hashtag bandwagon. I don't want Star Wars to make literally every piece of content they can without a real look into whether what they're making is special. With the Han Solo thing, it's my belief that there was nothing that movie could have done while still maintaining its Solo origin story aspect, because people just didn't care. Han Solo is essentially an archetype. He's a smuggler ripped out of any fantasy novel. His backstory is easy to imagine and not that interesting. The movie felt like something they were doing to check boxes. I don't know why Solo is randomly catching strays in this video, but it is. I think the movie probably could have been saved by not making Han Solo's backstory the main focus and instead having it be based on some event. I actually think Andor, from a marketing standpoint, had somewhat of the same problem, where who cares about Cassian Andor? This random dude from a movie which is really good, but arguably has one of its weaknesses being characters. But anyway, back to the Acolyte. Yeah, it didn't do well. It doesn't have the prestige like an Andor, I think, to justify its continual creation as art for art's sake. So I don't think we should, and I don't think we will get a season 2. So what went wrong? Why did people not check in? Well, the biggest thing I think is the lack of a hook. The Mandalorian had a hook. It was the first live-action Star Wars TV show. The Book of Boba Fett had a hook in that we saw Boba Fett's character return in The Mandalorian, and he was in his own right a well-loved character. Kenobi offered the prospect of a return to the prequel era, at least in tone. With The Acolyte, I don't know what they were banking on, whether it was the High Republic attracting more people than it did, or the promise of a Sith-based story, but for the latter at least, that was clearly not something they were going to deliver on. I think that Khmer and also Darth Plagueis, but just the Sith generally could have served as a really interesting draw for viewers. And if the show had been built more around those aspects, the aspects which were better executed and far more interesting than the twins, in my opinion, then people may have tuned in. Now, a show without a hook can still be successful. Again, Andor, I think, won people over because it was so well executed. The problem is, The Acolyte also didn't have that going for it. It was expensive, it generally looked pretty good, but episode to episode, I just didn't feel like it was well directed. There were a lot of slow moments, the dialogue wasn't great, and I think especially that the flashback episodes thrown early and late on in the season completely derailed any sort of story progression. So the question becomes, how does Disney fix this? And this is something that I discussed in my Mandalorian video, which I'm referencing again now, and it's a tough one. Disney needs wins, and I don't know if Skeleton Crew is going to provide one of those wins. I don't think it's going to be a massive show like The Mandalorian or like Kenobi, but we need to look to the future, and Star Wars cannot become what Marvel has often become, and that's skippable. We need shows which deliver and which get fans interested again. I honestly think Ahsoka's a good step. There were issues with that show as well. Viewership also wasn't spectacular, but I think it's at least on the right path. Andor, obviously, I wish they had stuck with the original 4 seasons plan because it's just so solid. Otherwise, get Tony Gilroy, get someone who not just has a notion of what Star Wars on TV can be, like I think Leslie Headland did, but also proved ability to make it translate. It's so easier said than done. But maybe it also means Star Wars needs to just be animated for a while until we really figure out the next steps. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours, of course, on all of this down below.